Here we go. Time for a set of notes. You will have one set of notes this week. We are almost done, believe it or not. Um, Normally, we would have our testing time, and we would have camp at DC time. And, well, we're kind of winding down our sets of notes. Don't have too many more left, so savor your sets of notes that you do have. Like before, you are going to need to turn in this set of notes when we're finished. If you follow along, it should be really, really easy to follow along. That's all you got to do. So make sure that you do that. And then when you're done, send your notes back to me. Make sure you do the second page. So if I'm still talking and you're going, I don't see any more notes, then you need to turn to the next page, finish Shakespeare, and then finish the questions that you have on the backside. So let's try to get this done in 20 minutes or less. That is the goal. So I'm going to start this bad boy up. This actually is a continuation of what we talked about the other day. This is still talking about the writings and literature of the time period of the Renaissance and for Italy. I'm going to focus on this very first part, is printing press, because this is a time period when the printing press really does take off and things really change for the Europeans as a whole. So let's talk about that printing press. Developed by some guy named Johannes Gutenberg, that would be correct. In the 1450s, we're rocking the big beard of wisdom. He has this coffee filter around his neck, so his beard just flows right over top. Wears a big fuzzy hat, I don't know. But anyways, it must have been pretty warm and cool. But anyways, Gutenberg develops this in the 1450s. And what this is, it is a movable metal type that allowed for faster book printing. And if you don't get that, I'm going to show you a video tomorrow on it. Or there's the YouTube link. But anyways, prior to Gutenberg, which you see on the right there, books had to be written by hand. And only people who were wealthy could afford to have books because they cost a lot of money. So imagine if you have like the Bible at the time period, and you wanted a Bible for the time period. It was big, it was huge, it was ornate, it was fancy, and unless you had a lot of money, you weren't getting one. So now this printing press comes in, and that he's able to make pages at one at a time. It's still a long process, but instead of handwriting them out, using blocks instead, yes, like little blocks you had when you were a kid, putting some ink over top of it, pressing it down, hence it's being called the printing press. Then you could actually make pages out of it. And they were quite big, like you see right there. So because of this, things start to change. You have more books printed, and more people learn to read. So it would look something similar to this. However, all the colors and decoration that you see, that was actually applied afterwards. It was just a black type of writing or ink. But once you have more books and printed, more people can learn to read. And when more people can learn to read, then you have more ideas that would start to spread. You would have debates start to happen and improve in knowledge. And so in other words, more books made people smarter and gave you the availability to become educated. Even if you were not going to school, you could have books a little more easier. Rather than just only the wealthy class having this. So this is really important. This really does help the authors that we talked about before, and Shakespeare coming up here soon enough, because you could print them, then you could improve your audience, and you can make more money, I suppose, on the books that you printed, but your knowledge gets out there a little bit more. So Gutenberg does this. His most famous printed book that he has is the Bible, which becomes a bestseller pretty quickly and is still, I believe, almost every year, is the #1 bestseller in terms of books that are created. And over time is the Bible. And so this is pretty important, because if you can find a Gutenberg Bible, good luck at that. They are worth millions of dollars today. Going on a DC trip next year, knock on wood, hope we do. We'll go to the National, let me think, where is it? National Archives? No, Library of Congress. Library of Congress actually has a Gutenberg Bible that you can see. Now, you can't pick it up, look at it, because it's big and valuable, and they will have security guards jump on you, but you actually can see what this does look like. So good luck going to yard sales and trying to find one. So moving on, after your assignment yesterday, which was to tour the art museum, hopefully this kind of goes hand in hand with this, is we're talking about your famous artists of the Renaissance time period. Since people had time on their hands and they had available money to spend on artistes, then you have a lot of art that was done. Now, this is art that was, for the most part, pretty realistic. You see the lady on the left. She's very pale and European-like. On the right, well, we can argue about the ethnicity on this one, but it's supposed to be Mary and her son, Jesus. A lot of work was done. It was religious work at the time period. Now, as I will always tell you, children in the Middle East, adults in the Middle East, will be darker complected. They wouldn't be so European complected, but these are European artists and European buyers. So a lot of the reasons why they have that look at the time period is that's what the people wanted who were buying it. So let's talk about some of these artists, and probably are familiar to you. You might have know who some of these people are. First one here is Leonardo da Vinci, or Da Vinci to his friends, or Leo, or Nardo. Actually, no one called him Nardo. He'd punch in the face. But you have here is Leonardo da Vinci. This is actually a self-drawn picture of himself. Looking in a mirror, he just drew himself as to what he looked like. So we're guessing he's pretty old at the time period it is. Now, the thing about Da Vinci is he was well known for a lot of things. He was a scientist. You can see these again. He did these drawings, so very ornate. It also tells you he had access to skeletons if you made a look at that. Good. And he dissected corpses to study human anatomy. Anatomy, we've said this before, is the study of the human body. And his goal was to kind of find the perfect person, or to, find perfect scale to it. And so on a lot of health books or anatomy physiology books, you might see this. And this is Shakespeare's drawing of the Vitruvian man, what he thinks a person would look like to scale based on things that he has seen in science and such. And he studied fossils to understand the world's history. So he's kind of the first archaeologist, or the first Indiana Jones. Now, with this dissecting corpses, not to let that sit off the side, not really a favorable thing at the time period, especially if you know church history. Weren't too favorable to have people getting human bodies and dissecting them. And so anyway, so one of the ways in which they did that and got bodies is they were grave robbers. And I'm not saying that Da Vinci was, but would hire people to bring him some bodies so he could dissect them. But because of the dissection, you can see that we learn a lot about the anatomy and physiology of people at the time period. And this is something that's going to last for a long time. He was also an inventor. Your book makes mention of a couple of things that he invented and a couple of his sketches, some of which are very forward thinking, that in terms of he drew them and had ideas, but then they never really came to fruition during his lifetime. And he drew pictures of a glider, a helicopter, and even a parachute, scuba gear as well, diving outfits. So if you look at this, you can see that, kind of looks like a helicopter, the way it would spin and would raise up. And then on the bottom, you would say it's like a glider. Look at the wings. The wings are like that of a bat, not a dragon, but a bat, of things that he saw in nature, and then try to apply them in terms of machines to see if they would actually work. He also drew versions of a military tank, and as I said, scuba diving suit on page 621. Look at this one. I like this little military tank. It's got wheels at the bottom. It's got little axles on it for it to move. And if you look closely, you can kind of see people firing things out of the side. It looks like a little UFO, but the idea is if something hits it, then it'll skip up and not really do much damage. So not a bad idea in terms of a tank. He was also an artist. That's his big claim to fame. And so when we look at these people who do these types of things, most artists are good at like one thing. They're good at painting, or they're good at sculpting. But Da Vinci was kind of a jack of all trades, a master of all trades, really, is that he did all things well, whether it was sculpting, or whether it was drawing, or whether it was painting, whatever, through all different types of mediums. It was very good. And I love his stuff because I like the detail on everything they did. And his two most famous would be the Mona Lisa on the right, and then the Last Supper here on the left. The Last Supper representing the Last Supper, literally, of Jesus and his disciples before Jesus was crucified. And the Mona Lisa, no one's really sure what that is or what she was. Some people said that she was a prostitute. Some said that it was a neighbor or a family friend. So there's always this mystery as to who exactly this Mona Lisa figure was. And it's really not a big picture, too. A lot of people think it's a giant picture, but I believe it's hanging in the Louvre in France. And if you go and visit it, you'd be surprised at how small it actually is. But these are two of the most famous pictures, and ones that have been parodied quite a bit. It's like there's the Simpsons Last Supper. There's the breakfast cereals Last Supper. These are the famous Hollywood celebrities. Marilyn Monroe being dead center. Here's one with looks like Big Bird's birthday party, The Last Supper. And then there's a good Star Wars one as well. And I like the little Legos version. This guy's really surprised by something over here. But anyways, your next artist is a guy named Michelangelo Buonarroti. Say that 5 times fast. Good luck with that one. Also rocking the beard of wisdom. We'll call him just Michelangelo. His fans or his friends do him as Mikey, I suppose. He was a painter. He was a sculptor. He designed buildings, and he thought his talent came from God. I'm not saying that Da Vinci did not believe in God, but he was more of a secular artist who kind of drew religious figures because that's what he got paid for. But Michelangelo was religious, and you probably have seen this picture before: the hand of man touching the hand of God, from earth on the left, heaven on the right. And his most famous work is a painting of the Sistine Chapel. Sistine Chapel, while on his back for months at a time. He was hired to do so by the Catholic Church to paint the Sistine Chapel, and you can still go and visit that today. And you can see, look at all of these. I should get a little closer picture, but imagine all the detail and work on this that he did at all during that time period. And again, just not a painter, but also a sculptor. You probably have seen the David before, and I had to crop that one off because it is anatomically correct. And there's Moses there, rocking his big Moses beard. Kind of looks like Poseidon as well. So, you know, he was not only blessed as a painter, but also being blessed as a sculptor. It's pretty amazing. The third guy is a guy named Raphael Sanzio, or his buddy's called Ralph. And here is a famous painting of some cherubs. Grandma probably has this hanging in her bathroom. I always make this joke every year. It's like, my grandma does have this hanging in her bathroom. Famous painting of cherubs, but he also painted Madonna, the Madonna, not Madonna the singer because she's like old and stuff, but Madonna, who was Jesus's mother Mary. Again, you got to kind of take this with a grain of salt because Jesus is very pasty white and red-haired in this, which he was not at the time period. And he also painted the School of Athens, which we saw this photo when we looked at the philosopher section for Greece. But you have Socrates there coming in the middle, with I believe Aristotle right there coming through this School of Athens, which depicted the Greek philosophers. So look at how detailed these paintings are. And, you know, they're ones that have lasted the test of time. And the last guy we'll talk about is Donatello. Donnie. I had to include him because we just would not have the whole team if we did not include Donatello. Now, Donatello, he was known as a sculptor. There you go. And you're like, oh, that's it? That's all he did? Yeah, because again, if we don't include him, then we do not have the entire team of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, you can laugh all you want, but the 4 turtles of Donatello, Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo are based on the 4 guys that we just talked about. Kevin Eastman and Kevin Laird were when they came up with the Ninja Turtles in the early mid-'80s, let's say about 84, 85. They based the Turtles on, you know, famous Renaissance artists. So yes, those 4 dudes are also named as the Ninja Turtles. Now Splinter, Shredder, I have no idea. But anyways, those are your 4 Ninja Turtles. And lastly, since we're getting to writing and art, we're going to try to, you know, really combine the two with Shakespeare here. That you have this famous guy. He's not rocking the beard. He's rocking the fade, though. Look at that. Slick hair all the way back here. He's got a fancy little coffee filter on. But Shakespeare, who we'll have a video on tomorrow, too, he's a little different type of medium in terms of your art. That he was not a painter, was not a sculptor, but he was a writer, but not so much a writer like we had with the other guys in the last section. And this is in England also. So in England, you don't have a lot of famous English artists when you're looking at like art and painting. Instead, it's more of writings. It came in a different form in the Renaissance at the time period. And theater was actually really popular during your 1500s. Now, not like movie theaters. You're not going there to get popcorn and watching like Die Hard 12. But instead, you're going and you're being entertained. You're going to have plays put on for you. There's some singing. There's maybe a song, dancing. There's different things. Drama and comedy, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. But admission was cheap and everybody could go to it, so people really enjoyed it. In your plays, there's genres were about people's strengths and weaknesses and their emotions. And this is what William Shakespeare did, is that he wrote about these three main things: people's strengths, their weaknesses, and their emotions. And so Shakespeare comes along and he puts these into, you know, all these different plays, from historical to dramatic to comedy, that have really stood the test of time and people do enjoy. And so he's considered the greatest English writer of the era, if not all time. The Harry Potter fans will say that J.K. Rowling is, but I digress. But instead, we'll just say it's William Shakespeare. And he writes these plays that are tragedies, comedies, and history. So not only is it to entertain you, make you laugh like a comedy, but to help you learn things like history, but to also get you to feel emotion by these tragedies as well. So those are your three main genres that he wrote about. Now, you tragedies. This is where your character has some kind of flaw that causes their downfalls. Like it's their own fault they did something bad, and usually there's some kind of death involved with it as well. Examples of this would be Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet, the star-crossed lovers. There might be some supernatural involved. Macbeth involves ghosts, or believed to be ghosts of past murdered people. Romeo and Juliet is your teenage angst and basically like gang warfare, I suppose, depending on which movie you watch. But these are his three most famous: Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. And he did some comedies, so it's not all sad and drama for him. These would include A Midsummer's Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, and Much Ado About Nothing. So not everybody wants to go and just have sad things they're watching. Instead, they want to have some comedy as well. And then this last genre is the historical. Historical, that was based on fact and they were informative. Now again, take them for granted. Take it with a grain of salt. Is that they were based on what he thought had happened, and they were based on fact, not necessarily always the fact. So again, grain of salt taken. These would be like Henry V and Richard III. Remember Henry V? We talked about him, the king who used the archers to help take part of France for the name of England. And Richard III. Now, if you look at this movie poster on the right, you can see that it looks a little more modern. And that's what some of these people have done, is they have taken these plays, turned them into movies, hundreds of movies, from all different time periods. And one of my favorite ones that I've seen is actually Romeo and Juliet, with DiCaprio and Claire Danes here, where they use the language of the time period, but yet they put it into modern times. And it's pretty cool to see that. Still a little hard to follow the dialogue of it, but still good. But nonetheless, Shakespeare, pretty famous. You say his name, most people know who this guy was. And again, a different form of the Renaissance taking form of the writings instead of art in England. So look at that, 18 minutes. That's all it took, 18 minutes. So do not forget to fill out your notes, answer a couple questions you've got there, and send them back to me, hopefully within a day or so. So that's really easy. Tomorrow, we're going to look at a couple videos on artists and Shakespeare, and yeah, we're going to wrap it up here fairly soon with exploration. So hope you have a good one. See ya.